People still buy Nutella. If all of these holes are terrible, Linux has failed. It looked like ass. It ran like ass. If there is one comment or remark that seems to always come up in every single Linux related thing, it is this one. Why don't they just pull efforts and make one good Linux desktop or distro? This comment is the bane of my existence. It triggers me every time I see it because we do not want that to happen. So let us put this thing to rest. We do not want one single Linux desktop or distro, and so we are going to talk about why no one wants to make a single Linux desktop or distro, why it would actually be a terrible idea, why fragmentation really does not matter for Linux success anymore, and we'll talk about what success even looks like for the Linux desktop, and we'll also talk about our sponsor. This video is sponsored by TuxCare, and you probably know about them if you're a regular watcher of this channel. They offer solutions to automate the maintenance and security of your open source stack with rebootless patching. They also offer enterprise support for Alma Linux and Rocky Linux, and they have endless lifecycle support that delivers long-term patching for end-of-life Linux distros, for open source apps, for runtimes, and for libraries. Speaking of which, they now offer endless lifecycle support for Eclipse Jetty, specifically for versions 9, 10, and 11. They also cover Comet D, which relies on Jetty if your Jetty deployment includes an outdated version of it. That means you can stick to the version of Jetty you currently use and still receive security updates for as long as you need without costly code rewrites, and while staying compliant with your own regulatory and audit obligations. This either gives you time to prepare a migration to a newer version, or you can just stick with what works without upgrading without any time limit. This covers direct and transitive dependencies without any extra cost. All the security patches are covered by an SLA, all the updates are distributed from TuxCare's repos, so they're signed, and you get 24/7 assistance as well. Check out TuxCare's endless lifecycle support for Jetty down with the link in the description, but also they have it for plenty of end-of-life distros, languages, frameworks, and a lot of stuff. Hey, you skipped the sponsor segment, didn't you? Okay, well, why don't they all pull their efforts into one Linux desktop or distro? Well, because they doesn't exist. This comment assumes that Linux desktop developers are a cohesive entity or that they're part of one, which is not how open source projects work. Ask someone working on KDE to instead start adding options to GNOME, a different codebase, different APIs, a different design system, and a different toolkit. That would be like asking a baseball player to instantly start playing football instead, because we should just have one sport, right? That's just not gonna work. It's not the same rules, not the same physical skills, not the same physical build, not the same mindset, not the same game. Those are non-transferable to another sport. They could learn, but you cannot just automatically move to something different just because someone says it would be better if there was only one. That is obvious, but also they, as in all the developers, they don't want to work on the same thing. That's why these projects even exist in the first place. KDE, Budgie, GNOME, XFCE, Mate, Cosmic, Trinity, whatever other thing you want to use, they made their own thing because of a reason. If that reason did not exist, they would not have started working on another project. Assuming that they're just dum-dums and they didn't think about just pooling efforts is a bit insulting, I think. For example, GNOME was started back in the day because KDE, the other desktop, was using problematically licensed underlying libraries. Mate, Cinnamon, Unity, and Budgie were started because GNOME 3, in its first version, it sort of sucked. Cosmic was started because System76 did not want to work with GNOME extensions, they wanted to have control over the desktop, and presumably they liked nothing else that everyone had built in the Linux community. So of course they all have their vision, their goals, and that's why the Linux desktop is the most fun place to be when you're into computers. Because one size fits all basically fits no one, and also it's super boring. So now is the mandatory segment where a Linux fanboy will explain why Windows and macOS sort of suck for a lot of people. They are jack of all trades. They try to offer an experience that works for everyone, and in doing so, they provide an experience that really fits No one. People just got used to those experiences, but that doesn't mean that they're good for everyone. I'm sure someone will tell me that they love having UI elements and menus and app designs that date back from 95 in their 2025 operating system. And I'm sure some people will tell me that an OS that sucks at tiling and window management is perfect for their needs in the form of macOS. But in the end, those systems just do not work for everyone because they can't, because nothing can. You cannot build a single UI that fits every user's needs. A developer doesn't use their system in the same way as a graphic designer, as a writer, as a video editor, as an accountant, as a marketer or product owner. Although, as a former marketer and product owner, we don't really use our computers because our jobs don't really exist. We just have a lingo and meetings to try to hide the fact that we don't actually do anything. Fortunately, AI will soon automate all of these jobs, so I will never have to go back to working in online marketing or product ownership ever again. So thanks, AI. Jokes aside, all of these use cases cannot be translated in one single UI that is equally as good at handling tons of windows or a few maximized ones, simple utilities and very complex apps with the same graphical library and toolkit, workflows based on files and folders, or workflows based on applications. People using mostly mice or mostly keyboards or mostly graphical tablets or the three of them or touchpads, laptops, touchscreens or just regular desktops with 3 monitors or just the one or horizontal ones or vertically stacked monitors, or for the absolutely insane that little red nub on old Lenovo stuff. No operating system can build an experience that will adapt and fit every single one of these use cases. It's just not possible. And that's what Linux desktops are really good at, providing options. Options that are a baseline that fits a subset of people better than other options do. Instead of having one single choice, like Windows has, plus a few settings to try and make it work like how you like, you start with one choice that is very close to what you like, and you have a few settings to make it as close to perfect as possible. It's a better approach. You do have to use your brain a little, and I know it's tough in the year of our Lord Gaben 2025 to make that little pink wrinkly engine work, but it's still more efficient than trying to retrofit your use case to adapt to Windows or macOS. It's the usual square thing in a round hole, or vice versa. The square thing here is the Windows or macOS user. You can make it fit into the round hole, but it's going to end up all messed up and scraped up, because that's not how you initially needed to do things. You just conformed to the thing that you were forced to use. On Linux, you've got round holes and square holes and octagonal holes and whatever other shape you can imagine, triangles and stuff like that, pyramids, Illuminati stuff. You don't know, but yeah, if all of these holes are terrible, then it doesn't matter, right? And that's what some people seem to think, that all of our holes, meaning all of our desktops, are just bad, and so that's why we should have only one. And that's a bad faith argument that I see quite a lot. It's just not true at all. For example, some people dislike GNOME. GNOME is still one of the most used desktops on Linux. It's the default on Ubuntu and Fedora, two of the most popular distros out there. If it was a dismal choice, a really no good, horrendous, irrelevant desktop, do you think both Ubuntu and Red Hat Enterprise Linux would offer it as their only default option? Two of the biggest commercial desktops out there with paid support that they have to provide to their customers for a potentially horrendous desktop? No, it is a good desktop. It's just not suited to everyone. And don't tell me that GNOME is paying them to use it, because GNOME has no money, so that's not happening. People also dislike KDE. Again, if it was so trash, why would SteamOS offer it as the default for their desktop mode? It's made by a company that also has to provide support to the device that they sell to people. Why did KDE become an official edition of Fedora if it was so bad? Some people dislike Mint and Cinnamon, but it's still one of the biggest, most well-known, most recommended choices out there. Cosmic is even gaining accolades from everyone who has reviewed it, myself included. My point is, you are supposed to dislike some of these options because they weren't made for you. They were made for a use case that is not yours. And if someone tries to tell me that all the desktops and all the distros that we have are all terrible and bad, I would say they are either lying or they are so set in their ways that they simply cannot use anything new. None of our options are perfect. Nothing is. Windows and macOS aren't perfect either for any single use case. But that doesn't mean all of our options are bad. So a terrible French example. I drove a Citroën C1, which you'll see on screen right there. It is a yogurt cup of a car, and I was mocked for driving that car for years. The thing is, after 8 years of driving it, I never had to change the oil, never had to change the brakes, never even had to replace the tires. And I drove it quite a lot. I never had to take it to the shop apart from the yearly technical visit that you have to do in France, or bi-yearly. It just worked. It was perfect for me. I'm sure that for a lot of people, this car was a piece of trash that they would never have driven. But for me, it worked, and driving an SUV or a pickup truck would have been a nightmare for me instead, because I wouldn't have used all the storage space, I was just alone in my car, the fuel consumption would have been terrible for my needs, I couldn't have parked it would have been too heavy, it would just have sucked. So Linux desktops are just like cars. You have one model that works for everyone. Windows and macOS, they are Toyota Corollas. They will work for almost everyone, but no one really loves driving them, and they're perfect for very few specific people. The Linux model is better. But that's all fragmentation, and Linux cannot succeed with all that fragmentation. It simply can't. And yes, of course it can. I have one big example to prove it, but we'll come back to that in a minute, because first, what is success for the Linux desktop? What does it even mean? Does it mean getting 95% market share? Does it mean making Windows and macOS extinct? Just getting one single computer brand in mass market stores across the world, like the world-renowned Carrefour or Walmart or whatever thing you have in your country, Tesco, maybe, I don't know if they sell computers. To me personally, Linux desktops succeed when they start becoming a pre-installed option for most major manufacturers, and stores actually stock the Linux version of those computers. They are viewed as a normal option. And it also needs to have access to the programs people are used to. So basically, Affinity, Adobe, Microsoft Office, whatever. So yeah, according to my 100% accurate and factual definition of success, Linux has not succeeded yet. You can quote me on this. Linux has failed. But jokes aside, this has not happened yet. I'm sure that with 10% market share, it would be enough to actually get the apps we need and be relevant. And yes, I know we have a ton of alternatives to these applications, but people want the other thing. They don't want the alternatives. People still buy Nutella, even though the alternatives taste the same, destroy the planet way less, and cost like half the price. It's just what it is. So Linux has not succeeded yet, but could it even succeed according to my own definition of success with all that fragmentation? And I will be blunt, fragmentation is not a thing anymore. Not a thing that matters at the very least in terms of desktops or distros. Because first, there are standards. For desktops, for example, it is freedesktop.org. Most desktops follow those standards, so they're interoperable. If a desktop doesn't follow these, it is on them as a project. They're just not playing nice with others. These standards are all reasonable as well, so there is no reason not to follow them. I'm sure some will find ideological reasons, but at that point, that's on them. Second, our subsystems are abstracted nowadays. Pipewire, Wayland, or even X11 if you want that, app stores, terminals, init systems, whatever, it is abstracted. A commercial app has nothing to do with that. They just plug into an existing API or they develop one that uses these underlying systems. You don't need to reinvent the entire stack every time you want to build something. You can just use what exists without having to go to a low-level system. Third, app distribution is a non-issue nowadays. You can decide to go into the Thunderdome and you try to make every single package format under the sun. But if you're not adventurous, then it's Flatpaks or snaps or app images. They will run on any distro with one single package. You might not like these formats, but let's not pretend they cannot work at all. They can. They do, and they're being used already by major software. This thing is solved. It is not perfect, but you know what? Windows app installs aren't perfect either. They actually really suck. They place things everywhere. You cannot find the files again, and it's a weird wizard where everything is different. App installs on macOS are as space inefficient as Flatpaks can be, maybe even worse, because apps on macOS don't really reuse runtimes apart from the graphical library that is used by all macOS applications. Flatpaks do have runtimes. App installs suck on every single system or have flaws on every single system. That doesn't prevent applications from being made, distributed, downloaded, and installed on macOS or Windows. It also doesn't prevent those things on Linux. It is a solved thing. Finally, fragmentation on the desktops doesn't matter for success. The one desktop that will be the most used or the one that will be sold in stores will still use the same damn standards, and it doesn't matter who wins this. One desktop might be picked to be the Linux, but that doesn't imply the rest are hampering that success or will die off. We just need one alternative to be picked up and sold. When one Linux desktop succeeds, all desktops succeed, because improvements will trickle down to the entire stack and standards. So I told you about an example I had for fragmentation really not being a problem for success. That example is, of course, Android. Android absolutely sucked, and it still managed to get the biggest market share in smartphones. It looked like ass, it ran like ass, it had way worse phones than the iPhones at the time. You cannot dispute that. Those phones were garbage. It had no UI library, it had no coherency, it had multiple manufacturer UIs. Not all apps could run on all phones. It was a terrible system, and still it managed to grow and become something quite good, and it's now the dominant operating system on smartphones. It was fragmented to hell, and it still succeeded. Linux is less fragmented than Android was when it started. It can succeed just as well. And it should succeed with that fragmentation, because if it ever went to one single desktop, it would lose all that makes it Linux, and all that makes it interesting, and all that makes it good and better than other alternatives. If KDE wins and in the process everything else dies, then GNOME, Mate, XFCE, Cosmic, Cinnamon users all lose. If GNOME wins, KDE fans ditch Linux entirely. If Cosmic wins, KDE fans won't find what they want in there. One desktop would make Linux into a worse Windows or macOS. We might end up with a solid desktop, but we'd also end up with a system that sort of fits no one 100%, with fewer apps than Windows or macOS and worse hardware support. What makes Linux as a desktop awesome is that if I use my 5 remaining brain cells after years of abuse and internet consumption, I can pick a desktop that is as close to my needs as can be, and then tweak the few things that are needed to make it quite perfect. If my needs change, I can also change the entire desktop and keep tweaking to adapt to what I actually need. I could never do that on Windows or macOS. No one can, because they are a one-size-fits-all desktop. Linux needs to keep those options to succeed, and to succeed as it is. If it succeeds by moving into one distro, one desktop, and one app store, then I don't think it is success at all. So hopefully this puts this one desktop or one distro fallacy to rest. I don't want to read this in my comment section ever again. Anyway, if anyone talks about this specific fallacy, send them this video. And in the meantime, you can also watch this segue to our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. They don't have a one-size-fits-all approach because they have plenty of devices that you can pick from laptops to desktops to towers, gaming laptops, whatever else you want, plus all the hardware inside has been picked specifically to run well with Linux. They offer a few distros that you can have pre-installed, but of course you can install your own, and they offer repos for specific distros, so you can install the support for example, light bars, or the keyboard colored backlight, or their control center if you want. Basically, they make excellent Linux laptops and desktops that you can pick from the link in the description below. This is all I use to make all of the videos that you see. I even run their distro, Tuxedo OS. They're just fantastic. So as usual, the link is down there. They have all the options, all the price points, everything for everyone. Almost. You never have everything for everyone. So yeah, link in the description. Check them out. They're really, really fantastic. Anyway, this will conclude today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching it or listening to it in the background. If you didn't and you disagree, the comment section is, as usual, there just for that. And you know where all those YouTube buttons are, so you can click the like button, the subscribe button, the notification bell, or whatever else. And hopefully these buttons just lit up like a Christmas tree. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!